Welcome, CEOs. I am Hermione Olivia, and I invite you to cherish every opportunity to connect the dots. CEO Yourself was created as a destination for motivation and to inspire you wherever you are on your journey to become the CEO of your life. Coming up on this week's episode of CEO Yourself.
Purpose is one of the best fuels for the human mind, and putting everything together where you get up, here's a person who doesn't have any plans, hasn't got clear on their ideal self, and they have exactly the same task to do as this person who's super clear on their ideal self, knows exactly how this one day fits into the bigger picture of them having their best life. Which one's having a better time with exactly the same day? It's definitely this person. You can 100% want that award. Just check that it's aligned with your values so that the whole thing's a holistic package where, if no one saw that you got the award, you're happy, right? It's when you're doing it for other people's approval and it isn't actually important to you, that's when the barometer's a little bit off. Rebellious self-belief is the kind of to rebel is to stick it to the man. It's kind of yes, 100%. I have no evidence to think that I can achieve this. I have actually ample evidence to prove that it is highly unlikely that I will be successful, and I am most likely going to fall on my butt hard. 100%, I'm with you with that, but I'm still going to do it anyway.
Sabrina Percy is a coaching psychologist and accredited coach specializing in executive and human performance coaching. On this week's episode, we explore her CEO superpower, rebellious self-belief. Sabrina, welcome to CEO Yourself.
Thank you.
I've been begging you to come on for so many months. I'm so glad the moment is finally here.
Me too.
You have recently graduated with distinction as a psychologist with a specialization in business. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And what a pivot from where you were just a few years ago as an illustrator, which you were also incredible at, but it is an extraordinary shift in your career. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to the listener about what motivated you to make the change and what inspired you to do what you're doing now?
Yeah. And also, I'm really bad at double questions. So if I go off and don't answer half
I'll try
of
not to do that again.
You'll be no, but I'm just I feel like I can only remember one at a time. Damn it.
What motivated you to do it?
Yeah. So the motivation came from, you knew me during this phase. I was working as a fashion illustrator in London. I really actually think everything was actually going quite well with that. I had dreamed when I was sort of 16 to 18 that I would be going off to Paris Couture Week and I would be sketching front row and I would be sending my illustrations to Les Officiels or Vogue or whatever. And then that was happening, which was crazy. But I really enjoyed the drawing, but I felt like I had been kind of, not pushed is the wrong word, but I felt like I'd been funneled down that career path because I was crazy dyslexic at school. I sort of got semi-kicked out of school GCSE year. And when I went to A-levels, they basically chose my A-levels for me. And so they were like, okay, you're doing art, textiles and theatre studies, least amount of reading and writing. This is your route. And then when I wanted to go to university, because my older sister had and I knew other people doing it, everyone was like, don't think you're suited to an educational system. We haven't really got a proven track record of that. So maybe no uni for you. I think I'm probably quite stubborn. So I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to find a course that I can do. And literally after speaking to everyone, they're like, there's only one course in the whole of university that you can probably do, which is a BA in fashion illustration, because I had sketchbooks full of all of these drawings of girls in dresses and stuff like that. And so they were like, your portfolio is really big. If you want to go to university, this is probably the only thing you can study. So went to LCF, took 4 years doing a 3-year BA course because it's definitely still true. I did not have studying down. My time management, my understanding of briefs, all the extra reading wasn't really up to scratch. And so I actually didn't do very well. I think I got a third, after 4 years of a 3-year. It wasn't a good look. So we came out, but then started working professionally as a fashion illustrator. And the thing is that what's crazy is that I had to redo a dyslexic exam when I first started London College of Fashion, because apparently it runs out. So the first one I'd done was when I was 5. And then they were like, Sabrina needs to be retested because we need to know how bad it is at like 21. And when I got retested, it was bad. Like, I still have the report, and it's like Sabrina is in the bottom 1% of people her age. Wow. Like, we're talking like not completely illiterate, but like we're not that far off the worst cusp of it. And so I think that was really...
Was that discouraging?
I think it was just doors 100% bolted closed that had been interesting, that were just like, you are going to have to be in art. Like, that is going to have to be your happy place, whether you like it or not, because it just... you have no evidence that anything else could be feasible, right?
So the whole world was telling you that you had to be this person.
Yeah.
And you started to believe it.
Yeah. And luckily for me, like, I actually, thank God, could draw. So it wasn't like I was shoved down, a funnel that I was, completely miserable in and unskilled. Like, luckily, even though I had really bad dyslexia, I could, and weirdly, that's actually often... really bad dyslexics are quite good at art. It's like that weird correlation that no one really knows why. But I
really want the listener here
yeah.
to take a moment before we propel into this episode to think about where the world has pushed you into a door or a hole, or they've put you somewhere that feels comfortable based on perception, culture, environment, and think about whether or not it's right for you, intuitively and honestly, and then carry on with where you are now.
Well, and so we can go on that niggling feeling, right? Which is that I did love the drawing. I had dreamed of doing it, but I had this other like really intense passion for like the positive side of psychology. So not psychology to do with psychopathology and, dealing with disease and depression and anxiety, but more, what is the theory around me becoming my best self, and that psychology, like the I call it like the good vibe psychology, but like the positive side. And I loved it so much because it also suggested that you could push the predetermined possibilities that the world had already given you. And as someone who did feel like the possibilities may have been a little bit slimmer than I'd wanted them to be, that was a real, I was drinking that Kool-Aid. I was like, yes, that would be amazing. That'd be so cool. However, I didn't really have anyone in my life who was in psychology or doing anything like this. I didn't really have access to anyone to speak to. And so it all kind of changed where I had this burning desire and I found it really interesting. And I know you've spoken before that you've taken like time out and sometimes done like an in-depth self-development sort of like diet where you've like eaten it all and it's amazing. And I'd definitely done that as well. And I'd been like, this stuff is amazing. It really changes how I get up and face the day. Like, why isn't everyone doing this and talking about it? And so I knew I wanted to do it, but I just felt completely incapable of pursuing it in any sort of professional sense because I had to do art. Like, that was the only thing I could do. So I actually ended up going to this talk and an author was talking about her book and it was pretty amazing. She was a neuroscientist. She was amazing. Her name's Dr. Tara Swart. People have heard of her potentially before.
The one and only.
Yeah, exactly. And we actually joke about this now because I sat down afterwards, I got her to sign the book and I was just like, tell me how to do this. Like, this is what I love. This is what I want to do. And funnily enough, there must have been like a sort of, I was like, exactly what you've done. And Tara's like, well, I did medical school and then I did a PhD in neuroscience. And I'm thinking like, oh my God, 8 years time.
You're like, that's not going to work.
Exactly. And so amazingly, she actually was like, look, if you're really interested in this, King's College London does a master's in neuroscience. Here's the details. Why don't you look into it? And we'd swapped emails. And so that's what I was meant to have gone away and done. And this is why I'm so into accountability, right? Because this is literally the most serendipitous, important, potential fork moment of my life, which is it had been a year. I'm sure people can relate to this. It had been a year and I'd done nothing. I just kept doing the fashion illustration stuff because it was easy and I knew it.
But also when you want something so badly, sometimes the fear of rejection subconsciously is so huge it's easier not to act on it and to have it as kind of like this loose pipeline dream than it is to attempt it
and to test it and find out you can't do it. And I had sort of semi-looked at it and I knew, you know, my A-levels weren't going to get me into an MSc in neuroscience. They just weren't. And so it was going to take a diploma, then an MSc. And I was like, you know what? I haven't done maths or science since GCSE, double D in science, C in intermediate maths, like, just don't know. Like, you've got all those voices again being like, you have no evidence to suggest you can do this. This might just be one of those fantasy things. So I didn't pursue it. Now, this is incredible. Tara messages me, unprompted, a year later, incredible woman, being like, have you signed up to that thing?
Wow.
And I don't even know her, right? I'd met her after her book thing. So that was incredible. And I was filled with such like guilt that I hadn't done anything. And so I sort of messaged her back and be like, well, you know, I looked into it and I'd have to take a diploma beforehand and I don't know if I have what it takes and I just really want to help people be their better selves and I know that neuroscience is really important. And she was like, oh my God, Sabrina, you don't have to have a master's in neuroscience to help people, like in positive psychology. She's like, you can just become a coach and, you know, do that training and work with people on that level. And she was like, if you're serious about it, you should just sign up for some coach training. And I think it was generally that conversation and also that energy of having not taken action for a year and then almost like embarrassingly being caught out about it by such an incredible person.
Woman to
I
do
know.
that.
And so I just did it. I just signed up. I was like, here we go. We're pushing go on that button. And that started the long road, that was first the Human Potential Institute. That was about 8 months. Then I came out. Then I did an advanced practitioner diploma in executive coaching. That was a year. Then gave me enough to be able to sign up and get accepted into the Masters in Psychology with a specialization in business. 2 years. And then now we're here.
And graduating with distinction.
From an MSc. And the stats were heavy and the science was heavy.
With severe dyslexia.
Yeah.
So I want to stop here again and say to the listener, if you cannot see a path, you will find one. If it's meant for you, you will find a way. And this is the inspirational story that I was so excited to share because all the odds were stacked against you, Bina. Yeah. And even the people around you couldn't see the path until sometimes finding someone who's removed from the story that's been told about you sees that everyone has the potential as long as there's burning, passionate desire.
A lot of drive. Drive helps, for
and
sure.
then you went and you took it on and you worked so hard. And then this is somewhere that we share the same feelings, which is it's one thing to have incredible vision or to have all the best wishes or will in the world, but unless you go and back it up and you walk the walk, it won't happen.
Yeah.
You have to go and put in the hours, and that's what you did. You basically disappeared
Bye.
for years.
Yeah.
You turned your life upside down and you went and gave it your all.
Yeah.
And it's so incredible and I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
So let's talk about where you are now today. You have been coaching on the side for 5 years along the way whilst you studied. So let's talk about your thesis.
Yeah.
Take the floor. Tell us all about it. Tell us what you wrote.
So my thesis was titled How a Leader's Level of Consciousness Affects Their Executive Function. Or it wasn't affects, it was how it's related to, because we did what you would call a passive correlational design. So we're not going to be suggesting any causation at the end of it. And the reason I chose that was because, one, I work mostly with leaders. And so I'm very interested in the psychology that affects that demographic. Two, I like working with leaders because they are a high impact individual, which means that if you make them really happy, flourishing, full cup, you actually affect a bunch of people who you don't work with. So it's sort of like a Skittles bowling thing to do with human flourishing. Whereas if you work with someone who doesn't work in an organization and they're alone, you can flourish that person, but it might not have an immediate effect on like a team of subordinates or peers or sort of stuff like that. So, predominantly work with executives and in leadership. So wanted to do it based on that demographic. And then the question that I sort of had, I've been coaching 5 years, doing a lot of thinking. And what I wanted to know is, for me, at the center of the coaching assumption is the idea that if we sit down and I'm going to coach you, I'm going to ask you a bunch of open questions about the situation that you're in. We're going to discuss what's the situation like? What do you want? Whether your current way of being is like hindering or helping you towards that. And outside of and inside of that, I'm assuming that by you becoming more aware of the situation, it's going to result in you having better volitional control over your behavior to move towards what you want. If I didn't assume that, I would literally be sitting down with you, expecting you to get really revved up and inspired, but unable to do anything about it, right? So there has to be this sort of assumption that more awareness for the individual will result in better ability to coordinate their behavior towards a goal.
Did you prove that to be true?
So if we then look at that, one of the things that has to be occurring to sort of add weight to that assumption is that if I find someone who is really, really aware, they also should have very good ability to control their behavior, right? That would be the assumption based on that coaching assumption. And so what we did was we looked at, do leaders who have higher levels of consciousness, and this is consciousness more as a trait rather than a state. So it's more that they have higher levels of self-awareness. They are more pro-socially sensitive to the environment of like what other people are feeling and sort of stuff like that. Are people who basically more consciousness, more aware, do they also have, when we had to find a measure for better behavioral, like volitional control, and so we chose executive function, which is like this umbrella term that sort of encompasses lots of mental faculties that allow you to top-down control your behavior. And so variables inside that are like planning, working memory, emotional control, inhibition, these sort of things. And so when we looked at the two variables, we did find, yes, that leaders who had higher levels of consciousness did also have higher levels of executive function. But what we also found was that reflection was most strongly correlated to their ability to emotionally control their behavior, to plan better, and to shift their attention. And so the reason I like that, and I think that's so important, is because I really like telling clients to journal.
I was about to say, how do you encourage reflection? Journaling.
Yeah. And I think people have a misconception of how to journal well. Mm-hmm. And what I do say is that if you're using it to reflect, to improve your life and improve these other sort of domains of, you know, being able to plan better, emotional control, yes, there is probably a time and a place for having a massive rant and a brain dump and like getting all that negativity out. I almost would encourage you to then like take that out of your journal, bundle it up and put it in the bin, because I don't know how much it's going to serve you to reread the thing that you wanted to get out. Do you know what I mean? Because you're almost putting it back in at a later date then, which is not really going to serve you.
I never read it back.
Yeah, no, but I think some people, they might do, and they might be like, oh, I've got journal pages of me just having a massive rant about...
it sparks that emotion.
Yeah.
So how do you encourage people to journal?
Well, I'd like people, I say, you know, there's two things, is that at the end of the day, one of the best things I think you can do is that you're not really meant to be on your phone before bed, right? In a perfect world. You're also probably not meant to be exercising a lot because it's not going to help you sleep. You're also not meant to be eating. So now, like, half an hour before bed, things to do.
Definitely don't drink, don't socialize.
Yeah, exactly.
Just sit in a room with your journal.
Yeah. I know, but I'm like, that is a perfect time where you don't really have anything else. You could read a fictional book, which is also great to like turn your brain off. But why not just take the 20 minutes before bed? You get to wind down, you get to not look at a screen, you get to reflect on how your day went, and you get to ask yourself, you know, have specific questions that enrich the reflection process. Like, what was one thing that I learned today that I found really fascinating? Or what was like one thing today that really resonated with me that sort of gave me that zest and mojo feeling that I want to like actually bring my attention to and capture, so that I'm more aware of the things that give me joy and stuff like that. Or it's like, you know, how did I like do something nice for someone else today? And I
also like to think, I don't know if this falls into your negative pile, but like, how could I have done better today?
Yeah, of course. Like what, or, you know, instead of saying, how could I, like,
how did I do well today?
Like, what's one thing I could improve on for tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
that's a better way of putting
it. And I think, I honestly think that's just, it's such an underrated thing that you can do, that if you build the practice of it, because if your brain knows it's going to be asked a set of questions every evening, it's going to start looking for answers during the day, so it has the answers for those, right?
Positive reinforcement.
Exactly. And so if you're asking yourself, how was today great? You know, what's one thing we could do to be even better tomorrow? How did I give back today? What did I do for something that was nice for someone else? You know, maybe instead of when you're scrolling on the phone and you see someone coming in on tube, you're like, oh my God, I can give them my seat because I know that this is going to be like that thing that I did. You know, you're going to give yourself a availability bias to look for the things that you're going to have to answer in the questions that you're going to ask yourself that evening. And so I really think that that's an underrated thing that I almost think everyone could benefit from. And I don't think that there's a time compromise for the last 10 minutes before you go to sleep because you haven't really got anything else better to do in that time anyway. So yeah.
What else would you say are the tips and tricks that you regularly share with all these incredible executives that you coach that we could easily implement in our lives?
Yeah, so when I sort of came up with the like Centien term, or like that's the sort of name of the business, you know, I think loads of people have a real problem coming up with like the names of what they want to call their business and stuff like that. And, you know, classic dyslexic, I'm an absolute piece with making up words that don't belong in the English dictionary. So I was like, why not just keep with that? And so for me, Centien is about cent, which is 100. So it's like 100 is like 100%, like fully consciously, sentient being conscious, being like conscious of creating your ideal self. And I have to be so careful when I say that because ideal has a negative connotation to be an egotistical, marketed version of self. I don't mean that. What I mean is that it is the person who is a version of yourself that is most aligned to your values, that you would be most proud to become on that level of values and virtues, not the proudest version that you would like to become to show off to your mates that you've got some designer thing or a cool car or whatever. So it's that sort of like much, much deeper, like this is a really aligned version of what I think is my values and I am closely aligning my behavior to this person.
How do you differentiate the two? Because I try to look at motives behind why I'm doing things. Like if I'm setting up my strategy for the year, it's what's motivating you. And it's very often that you go, oh my God, that's just ego. I don't even want to do that necessarily.
Yeah.
I think that I am expected or I would be celebrated for doing that. So looking at yourself in the mirror.
Yeah.
How would you encourage people to get clear on the two?
So you can totally put in fancy shiny things in with the ideal self. I think the problem is that what you're trying to avoid is chasing a bunch of labels that when you get are not going to make you happy because it isn't aligned to any of your values. And that's a really sucky place to be, is that you go down this route, you achieve all these things and you get all these accolades. And then let's say your values are like, you know, like helping others and like doing good and giving back and like all these things. And actually you've really lived a life of like determination, being like super cutthroat, courageous. And then your life's an example of those and not of your more aligned, deeper ones. You're going to get cognitive dissonance and be a little bit, you're like, oh, damn it, you know, like, can I switch this up a bit? So it's just 100% have the shiny things. And I don't want, it's not about, oh, you know, okay, I'm not allowed to want, you know, that award, or you can 100% want that award. Just check that it's aligned with your values so that the whole thing's a holistic package where, you know, if no one saw that you got the award, you're happy, right? It's when you're doing it for other people's approval and it isn't actually important to you, that's when the barometer's like a little bit off, I think.
I love that. That's such a good way of checking yourself. So our CEO Yourself principles are to have a clear vision, a clear strategy, and then to build the habits and lifestyle to support the fruition of that vision and strategy. How do you recommend that your clients develop a really clear vision for themselves? Like, you know, we're coming towards the end of the year. The listeners will be listening to this episode as they finish the year, the work year, I should say. And, you know, it's an amazing time of year, I think, because it's an opportunity for introspection and everyone's offline. So there's that incredible moment where you don't feel the pressure, you're not missing meetings or emails.
Mm-hmm.
At this point in the year and looking into the new year of 2025, how do you encourage the listener to look at what do they want to achieve this year? What is their vision and how are they going to strategically make it happen?
Yeah, so I feel like I've coached enough that I've started to see like a pattern that, because obviously the first thing you want to say is everyone's journey is individual. How am I going to give generalized advice? Like, that's just not going to work. But I think that is like having never met someone and them listening and being like, give me something I can do without telling you my entire life's, like plans.
There must be trends.
Yeah, exactly. Is that what I found I think serves everyone is like, I would always start from actually value identification. So have your top 3, 4 values like center stage before you plan anything, because that is going to be your anchor for alignment and ending up, when all fails, in the right place, right? So I'd start with your values. Then it depends what kind of person you are and whether you're more clear on the person you want to become or whether you're more clear on what you want to achieve, right? And so depending on that, I would actually go with the lowest hanging fruit because the other one will come depending on which one you lead with. So for me, I either get them to get really clear on what we call their Centien self, which is that idea of this ideal self that's aligned with your values and not an egotistical for someone else self. And that when we do that, we're like, I want this person to basically create an avatar. Like I want it to be so clear. Like I know how they speak. I know what they believe in. I know how they handle conflict. I know what their morning routine is. I know how they love people. I know how they show up in friendship. Like there is no part of this person who you want to become that is left undesigned or unintentionally investigated, right? So it's literally like you've created someone who's almost real, right, in front of you. And that does mean that the more real and the more you've made them into a person, when you're in those situations where you're like, I don't know what to do, you can say, okay, well, what would your sentient self do? And that immediately, if you've made that really clear, it gives that person a sort of like droplet of, right, that's the most aligned behavior because I know that this is what my sentient self would do. And even though I'm feeling scared, reactive, defensive, that's my immediate reaction to the scenario. It's not my most intentional aligned behavior that I would take. So that's really important, is getting super clear on that. And then the other thing is I always sort of say to people if they come into coaching, I'm like, don't do an easy goal because you might be able to pursue the easy goal by yourself. And, you don't have to be here. Like, I love chatting to you, but like, if we're going to like work together, why not work together to something that you almost don't think that you could achieve by yourself? And that's the purpose of this relationship, is that I'm going to support you in those moments where you're like, oh, mate, I don't know if I can do this. And then you're like, yes, you can, like, 100%. And you have that other person to fill your cup when your cup's running like a little bit low. And so the Everest goal, I like people to do like 5 or 10 years because it makes the 1 year ahead of you fit into a bigger picture. And having that bigger picture, I think, is so important because I think if you chase year by years in isolation, they become disjointed parts of a jigsaw puzzle. Whereas if you have 1 year, but you know that that's year 1 of year 10, and that there's this sort of summit at the end of that you really want to happen, then even the bits that suck in that next year that are like really admin heavy, that aren't inspiring and don't fill you with zest. Do you know what I mean?
Which there inevitably will be.
Which are going to happen. You can be like, but hold on, this is one task that's part of this amazing summit that I'm working towards that just means the world to me. And it sort of injects that zest and mojo thing back into the things that seem more trivial and like less inspiring to do, but like you still need the energy to get them done. So first things first, get your values, get your ideal self really clear. Make like ideally a 10-year plan. If you can't handle that, make a 5-year plan, which puts your 1 year in context so you can connect to why you're doing all the things you're going to do over the next year. And then when it comes to habit implementation, you basically take that first year and you break that down into 12 months. And you now know what has to happen at the end of every single month for you to be on track to finish the year so that you can start year 2 of the 10-year plan at the end of it, right? And then if you want to go more detailed and you want absolute structure, you take that 1 month and you plan the month. And so now every single day you have purpose. You don't just have purpose of a to-do list. You have your like raison d'etre, or like Aristotle calls it telos, can't speak Greek, so like me pronouncing that's going to go badly. But, you know, it's this idea of like, you know, purpose is one of the best fuels for the human mind, and putting everything together where you get to get up, you know, here's a person who doesn't have any plans, hasn't got clear on their ideal self, and they have exactly the same task to do as this person who's super clear on their ideal self, knows exactly how this one day fits into the bigger picture of them like having their best life. Which one's having a better time with exactly the same day? It's definitely this person, right? And so I think that if those are like the things you can do. And honestly, if you're on that train where you have your ideal self, you have your values, you have your year, you've broken that down into even the smaller steps, so every day makes sense in a bigger picture, and you're compassionate to self, not every day is going to be the best day, but, you know, hopefully in your ideal self that you created for yourself, that person's also going to be compassionate to the self when it's maybe like a less high performance day, then at least, you know, I think we spoke about this, not on this podcast, but you've only got so many decades.
Yeah, can we talk about the decades?
Yeah,
I want you to introduce the decade theory.
Yeah, so you've got like at best 8 or 10. Like at best,
well,
you know.
8 or 10 is kind of a push. I feel like you have like 6.
I don't want to. Oh, but then
I feel like the first 2 decades.
No, exactly. No, I meant total. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
I was like, don't change it down
on average,
to 6.
you have like 8 to 10. But in terms of working
doable,
decades,
exactly. Because like
the first 2 are out.
The first 2 are out.
The last one's out.
The last one's out. Yeah.
Let's hope at the end we can relax.
Yeah, exactly. And so you have this sort of like, you know, almost like a 40-year push span. Like, you know, if you wanted to leave something that was important to you as some sort of legacy, or you wanted to take your talents and contribute in some way to the world, this is actually your 4 decades. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, done. And then, you know, yes, of course, you can pursue them later, and there are people who pursue them much earlier. So, you know, I'm going for a generalist rule, but 4 of anything is not a lot of things, right? And so you would only make this plan that I'm talking about 4 times. That would be it, you know, which is, it's just so crazy. And so for me, I would not have been able to achieve what I have achieved now if I hadn't known how this all fits into a plan that I would pursue in a straight goal, right? I knew that I wanted to do coaching, but I also knew that I wanted to become a chartered coaching psychologist, which I am on the route for now. But like, that's 5 years of reverse engineering, one sit down, like meeting with a bunch of people and a portfolio of work, right? And so sometimes when you want to sling a really, really heavy hammer, you have to put in years and years and years of work to get the strength to be able to lift that one like handle and swing it properly. And so it's that whole thing of like, okay, year 1, nothing exciting is happening in year 1, but it means that I get to year 2, and in year 2 it's going to be a little bit more exciting, and then year 3, okay, now I like can actually like hold my own, and I'm you know, more of an expert, and I understand these things, and like year 4, and then you start stacking all of them, and you know, knowledge and experience and professionalism, it works on being compounded. And so if you can stick with something for 10 years, after those 10 years, you're pretty damn good at that thing, you know?
It's like the 10,000 hours.
Right.
But I hope in reverse, for those that are on the wrong path for themselves and know they are, that they take this as the end of year wake-up call to reassess and jump off that train, and then to jump onto the new one. Because even for me, I call it year 0 this year for us. We launched in March. And the reason I call it year 0 is because of that slaying, kind of like not feeling like you're getting anywhere. Like, of course you are, but particularly if you're like type A OCD.
Yeah. Well, and you've got no compound.
Yeah,
no compounding.
exactly.
You are taking no leverage from any previous years.
Yeah.
So you are first principles. Enjoy.
And
you know?
in those hard moments, you shifted the thinking for me so much into, this is the very beginning of the mountain.
Yeah.
It's okay that it's inevitably almost harder at the beginning, because for example, with your coaching, when you started out, you would have had to have a much more affordable rate, or in fact, you might have had to do it for free to get some experience.
Yeah, totally.
So to all of those out there, we've been there.
Yeah.
And we continue to be there in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And just seeing it as you've got to build those foundations. So it's timely and it's expensive and it's harrowing. But having that vision, as you said, as to where you'll be in year 2 and 5 and 10, suddenly it makes that year 1 much more exciting.
Yeah.
And motivating.
Yeah. And you're like, I'm going to take, I already have planned in the grand scheme of things that this year is going to be a difficult year because, I'm not at year 6 where, I'm known for this thing. I've got practice in it. I've got accolades, or I've got, social proof, or all of those things. And even with let's take it out of a professional sense and let's take it into, for example, just a study sense. When I started that master's, oh my God, did I have to eat humble pie? And it was not good humble pie. It tasted bad. I got into the stat class and I was like, I am so thick. I do not get this. This is going to be an actual problem. And you were like, I generally didn't have. It's not that you suddenly have low self-worth, but you're like, if you always do the things that you're good at, you do get this sort of oh, I'm good at things. That's so nice, And then when you go and do something that you are absolutely really bad at, you sort of come crashing all the way down to maybe those situations that we don't put ourselves in, that we are at our early careers or early stages of life, where you're like, wow, okay, so I suck at this, but this is one of those things that I'm going to have to learn to do if I want to do the thing that's really important to me. So, then it's just we're just going to have to trudge through this, one stat at a time, pretty much, And so it's okay, if I don't get this, I'm on YouTube, I'm listening to a podcast, I'm watching a funny TED Ed video about it, because you're determined, you're I just have no basis for understanding this. I have no pre-existing, I feel like all of my GCSE maths is not with me right now to help any of this make sense. But, and I can acknowledge I am absolutely rubbish at it right now. Terrible.
And this is where your CEO superpower comes in at last, rebellious self-belief.
Yeah.
Because where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
Why did you choose rebellious self-belief?
Because I think it's, I definitely got branded with rebel anyway. I'm quite comfortable with that one. Do you know what I mean? It's followed me for a while. But when it comes to rebellious self-belief, it's that if you think of a rebel, they are willing to go it alone, even if no one else wants to go with them, right? And it's that I don't need the support maybe. I am just gonna make this happen come hell or high water, And that's the kind of rebel energy, is that everyone's we're not with you, or if you do that, you're on your own, or
or it's too hard.
Exactly, or it can't be done.
Or stay in the safe road.
Yeah.
Because it makes everyone else feel comfortable.
Yeah, or it's really, really, really unlikely you will be successful based on really good evidence. So you are being semi-delusional in thinking that you can do this. And so rebellious self-belief is the kind of to rebel is to stick it to the man. It's kind of yes, 100%. I have no evidence to think that I can achieve this. I have actually ample evidence to prove that it is highly unlikely that I will be successful, and I am most likely going to fall on my butt hard. 100%, I'm with you with that. But I'm still going to do it anyway. You know what? Because I like it and it's important. And I think if I spent my life doing something, I want it to be aligned with the thing that I think is aligned to my values and does good for the world and is cool. And I want to be able to know the stats because I want to be able to be at the front of the theories that are going to help people. I'm in an arm wrestle with life. I have to do it. So even if I'm going to suck at it, I'm going to have to figure a way through.
So what's your advice to the woman out there who's listening and is so inspired and excited by this conversation that they want to suck it to the world and go and do that thing that they've always been told that they can't? What would you say to them?
I think that they should 100%, if there's something that they have a burning desire for and it's always niggled and they have self-doubt around whether they can or can't do it, we live in such a cool age that I can say this. I maybe couldn't have said this 20 years ago because I said to someone today, I was like, I'm a bionic academic, right? If you took all my tools away, if I couldn't listen to the audiobook version of the textbooks, and if I couldn't right click and get the correct spelling of a word, I'm pretty sure my thesis would have looked like absolute gibberish, and I don't think my professors would have been able to mark it, right? So I am a bionic academic. I do rely, if you took all my tech away, I'm probably not going to be able to be successful in this endeavor. But we live in an incredible world where all of these things are coming together. So, even if you weren't good at something 10 years ago, give it another go now, because the world has changed massively. And even if something that would have taken you a week to do 10 years ago can potentially take you one day now, because there are all of these things in place. And so what I think it is that, you know, first of all, it's the being able to have the courageousness to re-examine things that you've tried, that you have evidence that you can't do, but maybe now things are different because of technological advances, and maybe you're at a different stage in life and all this sort of stuff. And I also think that be ready to really, really suck at it. And you know, that's why I think knowing why you're doing it, how it fits into a bigger picture is so important, because like there was no way I was going to do that master's and not eat really severe humble pie. Like I was not going to walk in there and be like, oh my God, I never knew I was naturally gifted at really advanced maths. Why has this been a secret to me all along? Like it wasn't going to happen. You know, it was going to be hard graphing. And I think what puts people off is that they try something and they get there and they're like, I hate this. I have really low self-worth right now. I'm trying to do this thing and I absolutely suck at it. And that lots of people are sort of like, I want to say I told you so, but I'm not going to.
And the noise is like proven.
Yeah. And you know,
you have to push through it.
Yeah, and that's exactly the thing, is that if you're going to embody rebellious self-belief, you have just got to hanker down to the deck and ride the storm, you know, and you have to be, it's not going to be pretty. I'm not selling you like this is how you make your life like really like chilled and, you know, full of pink fairies and unicorns. Like, I'm like, this is going to hurt. It is going to be like hard for your self-esteem, and it is going to take a lot of cognitive effort. But having, you know, it's that Nietzsche quote. It's like, he who has a why can survive any how. You have to have a why, because the how of doing this new thing is going to be painful, but it's going to be really cool. And it's amazing for your self-esteem at the other end to do the hard thing and achieve it.
And to prove the naysayers wrong.
Right, exactly.
And I feel like the greatest metaphor for your rebellious self-belief is, for those just listening, Sabrina is incredibly tall. How tall are you?
6'2".
6'2". And something I've so admired about her, which in honor of that, I'm wearing my highest heels today. She never dulled herself down or dimmed her sparkle by wearing flat shoes to make other people comfortable. You always wore the highest heels. Yeah. And I've always admired that so much. And every time I walked into a room and I could see you towering across people.
Literally like, where is she?
Yeah, well, it's very hard to miss you. But I would always walk into a room and go, wow, that is so impressive. And I always kind of like smiled to myself as I walked in, because it became just who you are. And I want that to be the closing message for the listener, is wear the heels.
Wear the heels.
Never lower yourself down to meet other people's expectations of you or to make other people comfortable.
Yeah. Live
in your fullness and your greatness, and never be afraid, and live rebelliously.
Yeah. And what's when I can actually so speak to that, and this is I want to add something on the end, which is that when I was younger, I was 6'2" at about 14, right? Hard to be that tall at that age, like, ow. And I wasn't ready for the attention that you get from being that tall. And I would like get up, you know, in the pub, and I'd want to walk to the loo, and I'd hear people say as I went, oh my God, that girl's so tall, like, look, you know, and you start to do this, right? You start to really shrink into yourself, because you're like, I just want to go to the bar and get another drink, but you know, I don't want to be this sort of like really obvious, like, you know, and you get all the sort of, you know, I was called Giraffe and all these names at school and da-da-da-da-da. And I think what was amazing with the process of actually getting older, right, is that it also helps you step into who you are, even if that's different, right? And I think that, I don't know the age range of your listeners, but like, you know, when you're younger, I did want to wear heels, but I mostly wore heels because I wanted to go out and to be taken like seriously as an older than I was. But I also felt so insecure while doing it, right? I wasn't that person who was like, I'm massive and tall and like, I love it, you know? But I think as I've got older, you know, it's that whole thing of like, oh my God, yeah, I'm 6'2", my hands are massive, like almost can only wear guy gloves, you know, like literally can only shop at tool section, you know. But you actually are like, yeah, I'm different. That's me. Do you know what I mean? And I think before you're like, I'm different and I'm trying not to be really, really hard. You know, just give me some seconds and I'll figure it out. And I think as you get older, oh my God, can I actually read a quote that I've seen recently that is like literally blown my mind, and I think people should really hear it, and I couldn't believe I hadn't heard it before, and it's just, I'm living by this at the moment, okay? This is Brené Brown. We love her. So she put, you either walk inside your story and own it, or stand outside your story and hustle for your worthiness. That one is hitting me so hard at the moment.
That's
because
so great.
I think there is this temptingness that if you are slightly different, you do want to be like, oh, can I just conform? Can I just be like everyone else and blend in? That would be amazing. And, you know, if you're 6'2", or if you're really dyslexic, or whatever it is that you have, I think your life will be more enriching, more fulfilling, more aligned if you can find the courage to embrace, to be the best version of yourself versus what we have, which is being the best version of a societal self.
And at the end of the day, individuality is what makes us beautiful.
Yeah, exactly.
So own and embrace it.
Yeah.
Bina, we have to wrap up.
Yeah.
Although I could talk all day to you. Where can the listener find you?
So they can either find me on my Instagram, which is Sabrina C. Percy. And then if they want to get into the sort of purely coaching side of things, the best place to go is my website, which is www.centien.co.uk.
Amazing. We'll link everything in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
I'm so proud of you, and I cannot wait to see where the next 10 years take you.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see you past year 0. It's going to be great. It's going to be amazing. You can make it. You can make it.
Thank you.
It would mean the world to me if you would share today's episode with someone you feel would enjoy it. And don't forget to hit subscribe, like, and leave a comment.